enthused by his ability to defeat the Romans and his softer administrative touch. Scipio has no option but to retreat, realizing he is deep in hostile territory. He marches to Placentia and makes camp across the Po River. Hannibal pursues and catches up 2 days later. Learning of his arrival, over 2,000 Gauls allied to Rome rise up in the camp and attack Roman soldiers, killing many in their sleep. Before sunrise, they cross the Trebia to join Hannibal, bringing with them the severed heads of slain Romans. Using the Gallic defection as propaganda, Hannibal makes sure to spread the word that Rome's allies are joining him en masse, thereby boosting his popularity among the tribes. Scipio again moves south, not wanting to risk being caught in the open. A day later, he reaches the hills and sets up camp in a strong position, with hills protecting his flanks from cavalry attacks. Then he settles in and waits for reinforcements. By mid-December, the two consuls join forces. Discussing how to confront Hannibal, Scipio argues against taking the field, stressing that Longus's troops lack experience and need additional training, having been raised less than a year ago. Longus disagrees and sets up camp a few kilometers north from Scipio's position. Just as eager to fight as Longus, Hannibal maintains his camp on the flat plain and surveys the potential battlefield west of the Trebia River. Meanwhile, he sends a raiding party to ravage the area along the river, suspecting that Gallic tribes living there, who pledged allegiance to him, are now negotiating with the Romans. It's unclear if the Gauls intended to betray Hannibal, but with their villages now being raided, some of the tribesmen appeal to the Romans for help. Longus promptly sends 1,000 Velitus across the river to attack the raiders. With Hannibal's troops scattered across the area and encumbered by plunder, Roman troops start picking off small groups of Carthaginians, quickly routing the raiders. Seeing this, troops on duty outside Hannibal's camp rush to the aid of the retreating raiding party. The fighting is fierce, as both sides want to prove their superiority, but the Roman Velitus are soon forced into a fighting retreat. The skirmish escalates rapidly, spreading across a large area. More and more troops from each side join in. Pockets of clashes develop as neither side is able to shore up its ranks. It becomes apparent that the chaotic skirmish might turn into a full-scale battle that neither commander will be able to control. Hannibal takes the initiative. He stops sending more troops into the fray, trying to avoid a battle that he did not plan and can do little to influence. He then audaciously rides out in person and rallies the scattered troops. He pulls them back and arrays them in a line outside the camp. The Romans advance, but Hannibal restrains his men from charging the enemy. The Romans too halt their advance, refusing to attack the well-positioned Carthaginians, who can now be supported from the camp with projectiles and fresh troops. The day draws to a close. Hannibal demonstrates his shrewdness by not committing to an uncertain battle, and by restraining his troops, he exhibits what he would become so famous for: his extraordinary ability to exercise control over his army. Romans retire towards their camp, satisfied at scoring a victory against Hannibal's troops, their morale and confidence partially restored. Longus, who is described by sources as having an aggressive temperament, shows his eagerness to do battle as soon as possible. He won't have to wait long. At dawn, Roman guards sound the alarm. The Carthaginians are attacking the camp. Awoken to projectiles flying over the palisades, Roman troops are ordered to get ready for battle. On empty stomachs, the men rush to form up in front of their tents in frigid conditions. Longus sends all 4,000 of his cavalry against the Numidians, closely followed by 6,000 Velitus. But the Numidians soon break off. As the fighting moves north, the fast cavalrymen engage in hit-and-run attacks. Longus marches out with the rest of his army to meet the enemy. Heavy infantry forms into 3 columns, each some 3.5 kilometers long. They lag behind the cavalry and Velitus, but make steady progress. Numidians continue to avoid a direct confrontation with the Roman cavalry and Velitus. Meanwhile, Hannibal gathers his officers to lay out his plans. He offers words of encouragement and orders them to ready the men for battle. Well rested and well fed, Carthaginian troops take to the field. To the east, the skirmish continues. Numidians find themselves backed against the Trebia. They start crossing the river as they continue to pull back, pursued by the Romans. Arriving with the infantry and eager for battle, Longus orders the army to deploy on the western bank. The 3 columns begin crossing, chest deep in the freezing water. Meanwhile, Hannibal sends 8,000 infantry forward to support the Numidian retreat and to provide a screen for his own deployment. He then moves his main line about 1 kilometer towards the approaching Romans. Across the field, Longus's army takes several hours to deploy. After fording the cold Trebia, his men are hungry, soaked, and standing in the near-freezing temperature. The Roman consul places his Velitus in the front, forms his veteran infantry in the center, with Gallic and allied infantry on either side, and cavalry on the flanks. Hannibal deploys his infantry in a thin line. Gallic allies in the center, with Spanish and Libyan infantry on either side. Elephants flank the infantry, while the Numidian and Gallic cavalry is further wide. Around noon, Longus orders his entire line to advance, confident in the clear numerical advantage of his heavy infantry. The Romans advance in good order. The flat plain, free of any obstacles, seems an ideal battleground for their style of warfare. Meanwhile, Hannibal holds the line, letting the enemy come to him. Skirmishers get into range and begin exchanging projectiles. With Balearic slingers in their ranks, combining with javelin men, the Carthaginians quickly gain the upper hand against the Roman Velitus, who used up many of their javelins while pursuing the Numidian cavalry earlier in the day. Skirmishers from both sides withdraw through the gaps as the main lines of infantry close in. The heavier, more compact Roman infantry pushes the Carthaginian line back, causing heavy casualties to Hannibal's Gallic infantry in the center. On the flanks, Hannibal orders his cavalry to push forward. Some of the Roman horses become frightened by Hannibal's elephants, causing disruption within the ranks. But groups of Roman Velitus, specially trained to deal with elephants, mix with the cavalry and attack the terrifying beasts, wounding and killing many. Eventually, the Numidians manage to overwhelm and advance against the Roman cavalry. But despite Roman flanks being pushed back, the Carthaginian center is crumbling. Veteran legionnaires are hacking through the Gallic infantry. Without any reinforcements available, it seems that Hannibal cannot stop the onslaught. But what the Romans don't know is that while surveying the field on the eve of battle, Hannibal personally picked 2,000 elite troops and positioned them in a dry riverbed, hidden from view. Now they emerge from the ravine with perfect timing, just as the Numidians finally rout the Roman cavalry, poised to encircle the enemy. Hard pressed from the front by elephants, Carthaginian infantry and skirmishers, the wings of the Roman infantry buckle as the Numidians attack their rear. Meanwhile, Hannibal's center collapses as the veteran Roman heavy infantry cuts right through the Carthaginian line, still unaffected by the encirclement thanks to their discipline and organization. However, realizing the battle is lost, the legionnaires retreat back across the river to Placentia, maintaining their battle formation. Roman casualties are heavy, likely around 28,000 dead or wounded, while the Carthaginian losses are much lower, between 3,000 and 5,000. Losing most of his elephants, possibly all but one, is the only major loss for Hannibal at Trebia. In just a matter of weeks, Hannibal outperformed both Roman consuls with superior planning, near-perfect coordination, and control of his troops. News of the defeat rocks the Roman Senate and causes widespread panic among the population. The damage to Roman prestige persuades many more Gauls to join Hannibal. Additional attacks on Roman outposts and towns cause further disruption, before cold weather finally forces armies of both sides into winter quarters. But as Hannibal's devastating campaign in Italy gains momentum, a seemingly minor event in Iberia could threaten the Carthaginian war effort in the long run. Early in 217 BC, the Roman Senate is still reeling from the defeat at Trebia. But, determined to strike back at Hannibal, they look to other theaters to try and shift the balance of war. The Roman army